Every Bitcoin you don't buy is going to cost you $13 million, my friend. And it'll go up 29% a year, ARR. That is my base case. I think it's like 41, 42 times we bought Bitcoin in that range. So ever since August of 2020, we keep buying, we don't sell. It's a very simple strategy. Bitcoin is Manhattan in cyberspace. I just want to keep buying Manhattan in cyberspace. I have this theory that one day 8 billion people want to put their money in Manhattan in cyberspace. And of course, the more we bought, the more transparent we are, the more the capital markets get behind us. So now, if you're an investor on Wall Street and you're looking for the company that's going to buy up cyberspace, then you're buying MicroStrategy stock. And some people like Bitcoin, so they buy Bitcoin. Every day of my life, I tell people to buy Bitcoin. Some people want more Bitcoin, right? The joke I have is the only thing better than Bitcoin is more Bitcoin. So it was a $90 billion asset class in March of 2000 when I was first looking at it. And then by August, it was about $180 billion asset class. And right now, 4 years later, it's $1.8 trillion asset class. And I think it's going to 18 trillion, then 180 trillion, then it's going to go beyond that. So I think it's a very simple thing. I think Bitcoin is going to grow from 0.1% of the money in the world to 7% of the money in the world over the next 21 years. And of course, you should just go long and keep buying it. It'll go from 1.8 trillion to $240 trillion, and it'll go up 29% a year, ARR. That is my base case, 13 million a coin. Every Bitcoin you don't buy is going to cost you $13 million, my friend. Your Ford Bitcoin Ferrari is going to be a $55 million thing. Elon's forecasting 30 trillion, so we're still chasing after the robots and the self-flying cars for Tesla.
And that's what he's saying he's going to be at in 21 years.
That's what I heard. Actually, I think he's going to go faster. I don't think he said 21 years. Mine is a long-range forecast. I don't know what time frame.
How's your relationship with him, with Elon?
We all love Elon. I stay in my lane. He does rockets and satellites and cars and robots. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm just about Bitcoin. I talk to a lot of people in confidence about this, but maybe more to the point, I'm very public. I think Larry Fink of BlackRock is by far the most compelling spokesperson for the Bitcoin movement. And he kind of epitomizes the intellectual journey, which is a successful financier first hears about it and hears about all the negative things. And good financiers, they go through the checklist of what are the 100 risk factors, right? Because if you're really good at finance, you can tick off all 100 risk factors. So you do the check, you think about it, and you think, well, kind of scary, I'm going to hold off on it for a bit, and you're skeptical. I was skeptical in 2013. He was skeptical. But at some point, if you're around it enough, if there's a need, if you have a need to know, maybe you get pushed and you realize I need to open my mind and I need to embrace a new idea, find a new idea for growth. Maybe it's defensive, maybe it's a growth initiative. And then sometimes when a critical mass of people that you respect begin to speak with you about it, then you open your mind and then you take the position that this is actually a new, profound, revolutionary thing. It's digital capital. I misunderstood it before. I was wrong. I see a place for it in the world. We have this saying, which is everybody's against Bitcoin before they're for it. Everybody is against Bitcoin before they're for it. And so, yeah, it's not unique. It's pretty common. It's like 1 hour to denier. After 10 hours, you're a trader. It's like, well, it's an asset. I'll buy it cheap and sell it when it's too expensive. After 100 hours, you start to move to be more of an investor. Like, maybe this is a good investment, like Apple or Facebook. And after 1,000 hours, you're a maximalist. You're like, actually, this is an ethical good. This is freedom and economic and property rights to 8 billion people. This is a chance for 400 million companies to capitalize on an asset which isn't toxic. Wouldn't it be great if you could just buy something and get richer forever without taking risk? Pretty profound idea.
You'd have to buy in and you'd have to be patient. And those are two things that are very hard because the American people, the investor flips very quickly and they change their mind very quickly. And that's why the buy and hold concept.
Every day for the past 4.5 years, I get up and I say, buy Bitcoin. And then you do not sell your Bitcoin. Very simple mantras. And by the way, and I don't recommend anything else. There's 100,000 other investment ideas where it might be appropriate to sell them at some point. That's why I don't talk about them. I just talk about Bitcoin and I say, if you're going to buy it, be prepared to hold it more than 4 years. the short period is 4 years, the mid period is 10 years, the right period is forever. Buy it so you can give it to your grandchildren so your family will be rich in 250 years. That's what I would say about Bitcoin. And, look at generations. When you're in your 20s, you have a lot of time on your hands and you want respect and you want prosperity. You want to make it in life. I need to make money so I can buy a house, have a family, buy a car, do whatever I want. And so you take your time and you invest it in making money. That's why the millennials, the Gen Zs, they get crypto, they get Bitcoin because they have 100 hours or 200 hours or 1,000 hours. Now, when you get in your 60s or 70s, 80s, how many people past the age of 55 spend 100 hours studying a profoundly new investment idea to figure out?
Very rarely.
It's because you've already made it. You already got a family. If you're going to have kids and a family and a house and a whatever, you've already done it. And you did it by exercising your trade because you are good at something and you're confident and that's your worldview, like Warren Buffett's worldview, etc. So I don't blame people. It's just when you're successful at the end of your life, you know what made you successful. You don't have a need to know. When you're at the beginning of your life, you're not successful. You've got no respect. You've got no future. You better find something new. That's why Led Zeppelin, they picked up electric guitars and they played rock and roll because Beethoven and Mozart had already done the other thing. Too late for that. New thing. The new people get the new thing. And so occasionally you find a 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old who will embrace the new idea, but it's like, what is it? You have to be profoundly intellectually curious. Larry Fink is. That's why BlackRock is going to make a fortune on this. Or you have to be desperate, frustrated, nothing to lose. The truth is, I'd characterize myself that way in 2020. It's like the stock is $6 a share enterprise value. The company's enterprise value is $6 a share. And my choice is sell the company and retire or take a risk and open my mind. And I remember I'm sitting at my poolside next to my friend Eric Weiss, and it's March and the lockdowns hit and interest rates go to zero and the stock market's crashing and all hell is breaking loose. And I say, so tell me about that Bitcoin thing again. That's what you'll find that when, you look at people and they're one or the other, but it takes a while for a paradigm shift. You got to really need it or want it. And that's why it's an exponential process. I said, give me the the top influencers on the internet on Bitcoin. You gave me a list of people. Then I went and I watched all their YouTube podcasts. Then I went and I read all their books. I read the Bitcoin Standard. I read Andreas Antonopoulos' books on Bitcoin. I watched the debates, between Eric Voorhees and Peter Schiff on Bitcoin. And once I got through all that and I had done a deep think, then I started going in execution mode. How do I get an account? How do I buy this stuff? KYC me, set me up. And then after that, it's like massive education with my company too. Partly it was a personal track. What am I going to do? And partly is, what am I going to take my company? And that became, I sent a text message to all the officers of the company and all the directors. I said, I want you to watch these 3 videos on YouTube. And I want you to read this paper about Bitcoin. John Pfeffer had wrote a paper, An Institutional Investor's View of Bitcoin. I said, read this stuff, and then we're going to talk. And so after they read it, I had a one-on-one with each one of them. And it was like basically doing the rounds, every officer of the company, every director of the company. And gradually we formed a consensus. We formed teams. We started to power forward. It takes from March all the way to August 10th of 2020. And on August 10th of 2020, what we did is we said, hey, we're buying $250 million of Bitcoin, but we're also going to buy back $250 million of our stock in a tender offer. The stock was like $120. This is like $12 post-split. And we offered a premium. We said, well, you can tender your shares if you don't like the Bitcoin strategy. And so that took 20 days. So the way that we actually rotated the shareholder base and got the shareholders on board with the Bitcoin strategy was we said, we're doing this. We know it's risky. We know some of you may not like it. We'll buy you out at a premium if you don't want to go along for the ride. After 20 days, only about $60 million got tendered. So we had $175 million of cash left. And so we went from 250 to 425 million in Bitcoin. Then the stock rallied, generated a lot more cash from stock option issuance. We bought another $50 million of Bitcoin. And pretty soon we're off to the races and the strategy's working. And all of our investors were on the board. They wanted to be invested in a company on a Bitcoin strategy more than they wanted to be invested in a company that was going to continue with a conventional low growth approach. So we borrowed $4.2 billion at 82 basis points, and we bought Bitcoin with it. So for the people that like Bitcoin, they buy it, but people that really like it want to borrow a lot of money and buy more. And then there's another group of investors, the convertible bond investors. And how do you buy Bitcoin at the all-time high and get the upside but don't have the downside? So you buy the bonds, and it turns out that our bonds have outperformed Bitcoin, but they're bonds. And so that blows people's minds that we can actually sell you a bond. They don't just outperform all the other bonds. Some of these bonds are, they're trading 200 plus against 100 basis. So they're up 100%. So they outperform all the bonds, but they also outperform the Bitcoin. And that's because we've created a public company with a tiered capital structure, and we've got a lot of permanent capital. Then we've got the senior bonds and the capital structure, and then the equity, generates a BTC yield. And so a lot of Bitcoin maxis pile into the equity, and that gives us a premium. And we're able to use the premium from the equity in order to create very accretive capital markets transactions with the bonds and the rest of the equity. Most of our debt is convertible debt. It's not margin and call. You can't call it. It's unsecured, no recourse. So we borrow $1 billion for 5 years for 0% interest. There's no margin call possible.
Who gives you $1 billion for 5 years at 0%? Is that when money was cheap?
Convertible, actually, they still do. We borrowed $1 billion 2 months ago at 82 basis points. And so the way it works is we're selling convertible bonds. And the convertible bonds have a bond component, and then they have an option component, like a call option. And so the convertible arbitrageurs and the options traders, they like the volatility in the stock. One thing you might not know is we have the most volatile stock in the S&P 500. If you took all 500 stocks in the S&P 500, you said, which is the most volatile? We're like 100 vol. The S&P, the VIX is like 15. Most of the Mag 7 stocks, they would be like 20, 25 vol. Bitcoin is 50, so it's like 3 to 4 times the volatility of the S&P index. MicroStrategy, we lever the Bitcoin, so we get 2x that, so we get to 100. And conventional investors are afraid of volatility. They fear it. They're like, I can't handle the volatility. But volatility is like RPM in an engine. It's like spinning at 100 RPM instead of 10 RPM. So if you plug volatility in the Black-Scholes equation, the options are a lot more valuable if you have volatility. So when I'm selling a convertible bond, it's got an option attached to it. So if you're an investor, you want to buy a convertible bond from a company with large volatility, large liquidity, and durability. You want to know the company's going to keep going. But if you think about liquidity, that's like energy. So like, maybe I spin that little Merry Christmas hat, at 50 RPM. It's a little kid's toy, or a little balsa wood propeller on your kid's toy. But if I take a baseball bat and I spin it at 100 RPM, it's a weapon. But if I take a 20-ton flywheel and I spin it at 100 RPM, it's a turbine. I can move a ship. Well, now we have $30 billion worth of capital. And when we're spinning it at 100 vol, that's a huge opportunity for options traders. So there's a massive options market, a massive amount of liquidity, a massive amount of volatility. And so the convertible arbitrage guys, let me say it a different way. If you have 100 vol, you can generate 100% interest just by selling the upside. There are funds like MSTY, all they do is just sell the calls. They just sell the volatility and they generate like 180% dividend yield. So who loans us the money? People that want that volatility, because the volatility is worth a lot more than getting paid 12% interest. Many investors have large pools of capital and they're not allowed to buy the commodity. They have to buy a company.
So the question when a lot of people ask and says, why would you give your money to MicroStrategy to invest? So why not just go do it yourself and buy Bitcoin?
There's a lot of answers to that. One is, can you borrow $1 billion for free for 5 years with no recourse and unsecured? Probably not, right? Individuals can't borrow money for free for long periods of time. It's difficult. Companies can. So one reason why is because we can borrow $4.2 billion unsecured for a long period of time and pay less than 1% interest. We probably have the cheapest cost of capital in the entire market. If you look at every S&P company, if you look at every company in the market, who else can borrow billions of dollars for less than 1% interest? So one thing they want is they want our financial power. But then if you go to Europe and the UK, I think it's impossible, it's illegal for a UK investor to buy Bitcoin. They can't. Like, the regs don't allow them to buy it.
Anywhere.
In the UK, they can't buy it in their like retirement fund. They have retirement plans and 401k. So a lot of times there are regulations that prohibit investors from buying Bitcoin, but they can buy companies. We're a company, so they can buy our stock. So if you had money locked up in your retirement plan and you loved Bitcoin, but you can't buy the Bitcoin, you can't even buy the ETF, you can buy MicroStrategy. The options market in our stock is 20x bigger than the options market in BITO, which is the only Bitcoin ETF that had options. You can't borrow against those ETFs, but if you had $1 million of Apple stock, you could borrow against it at SOFR plus 100 basis points. If you have $1 million of MicroStrategy stock, you can borrow against it. If you have $1 million worth of IBIT or BTC, you can't. Some people don't like crypto or they don't like Bitcoin, actually, so that's one reason. They might short it because they don't like the asset class and they just short it naked. Another group of people might be macro traders and maybe they're shorting it to hedge another bullish play or because they think there's going to be a negative macro event and Bitcoin is a macro asset. So if you want to take a negative short macro play, like when there's a missile scare, the Iran-Israeli missile crisis, and people think there's going to be war in the Middle East, Bitcoin trades down. And so if you on Saturday night or something, or if you think something like that, you might want to take a short macro view. And because you can't short Bitcoin with leverage, but you can short MicroStrategy, with these options. Right. If you wanted just a macro handle, you might do it. And then the third class are these arbitrageurs that think that they want to short MicroStrategy and go long Bitcoin because they're going to bet that the premium we trade against is going to compress. And that was the Carousel trade.